Dr. Mundo can be one of the tankiest champions in League of Legends. At full build with the right items and runes, he can stack over 6k health and absolutely terrorize the backline. We've all experienced that for Mundo in the top lane, but how does this master tier player find success with him in the jungle? As a jungler, laners expect you to gank, get objectives, counter gank, and cover them while they push, all while they also expect you to keep up and farm with that power clearing Graves over there.
Try me.
Mundo's clear is pretty trash compared to most meta junglers, and he has no gap close, terrain scaling, or hard CC to set up ganks. He has almost nothing in his kit that a jungler needs. So how did NomadicBoulder make this pick work? Peaking at 428 LP Master Tier with a 65% win rate, he's the highest ranked Mundo Jungle in the world. In this video, we'll look at the build, playstyle, and decision making that make NomadicBoulder the true raid boss of NA solo queue. I'll give you all the secrets that make this playstyle so overpowered, to the point where you become completely unkillable while still pumping out major damage. You're definitely going to want to see the real game examples later in this video. For runes, he always takes Lethal Tempo with Alacrity and the Attack Speed rune to max out his dueling potential. And Last Stand rounds out the Precision tree, which synergizes really well with his E, as they both increase damage based on his missing health. That means when he's below 30% health, that's actually when he's dealing the most damage. And we all know how long Mundo can sustain in teamfights with low health. In the secondary resolve tree, he's 100% focused on getting tanky, opting for conditioning and overgrowth to boost his resistances and max health. Mundo actually gets the majority of his damage potential from tank items, as his ultimate, E, and W all have scaling damage based on his maximum health. He maxes E first, which gives bonus physical damage equal to 7% of his bonus health. This allows him to build full tank while still threatening the backline if left unchecked. Huge health bar and huge damage. So what's the champ's weakness? Getting kited. If Mundo isn't able to stick onto targets, he becomes nothing more than a target dummy. But NomadicBoulder knows this vulnerability in Mundo's kit, and I'll show you how he overcomes it. The first solution is taking Ghost as a second summoner spell. Mundo gets way more value out of movement speed than he does out of flash, as his kit relies on staying in close range of his enemies to be effective. We see this stickability trend continued with Force of Nature and Randuin's Omen. Both items make him incredibly sticky and make up usually what is the core of NomadicBoulder's build. Even furthermore, he builds a wide variety of boots depending on the situation. Most frequently, NomadicBoulder builds Merc Treads for the 30% tenacity on hard CC, but he'll also switch it up and go for Swifties if the opponents rely more on slows. He really only builds Steel Caps if the enemy team is entirely reliant on physical damage, because he values the stickability and the tenacity much more than he does mitigating the physical damage. All these build options ensure that he's able to stick to his target and be as disruptive as possible. The other weakness in Mundo's kit is his slow clear. Itemization wise, NomadicBoulder rushes Sunfire Aegis for the AoE burn on camps, and he always builds Titanic Hydra second. These two items cover up any deficiencies he has in his clear speed by the mid game, and I'll show you one other trick he has for maximizing his clear a bit later, which helps him to not fall behind other junglers. And here's the most basic build path that NomadicBoulder takes in most games. A core build of Sunfire, Boots, Titanic, Force of Nature, and then Randuin's. If a team comp specs heavily into one damage type, he'll build heavily into one type of resistance. Spirit Visage for magic damage team comps, and then Deadman's for AD teams, or Thornmail if they're AD with healing as well. On his first clear, NomadicBoulder's focus is always to get 1k gold for his Bami's Cinder. That's a full clear plus a Scuttle Crab. He always wards the opposite side from where he's starting to make sure he doesn't get invaded. The one game where I saw that he didn't, this is what happened. So he immediately went back to placing this ward. To guarantee he can get at least one scuttle, he'll path towards the side of the map which is most favorable based on lane matchups and the enemy jungler's most likely path. This means he has full clears prepared for either blue or red start on either side of the map. And he's incredibly flexible in his first clear and even goes leashless pretty often, while he's still always able to finish his clear by 310. Here are all the ways NomadicBoulder has optimized Mundo's clear to achieve these really fast and consistent clears. He weaves Qs in between auto attacks to make sure he doesn't cancel any autos, and while moving from camp to camp, he uses his Q to start the next one and always uses Q on large monsters while relying on the AoE from other spells to kill the small ones. His E, on the other hand, gives him an auto attack reset. It also does bonus damage on small monsters like the little wolves, raptors, and krugs. For these camps, he always uses E on the small camps to get the bonus AoE damage on as many targets as possible. And finally, he uses W as a second AoE spell on these small camps. To simplify, he uses Qs and autos on large monsters, then E and W to kill the small ones. He does all of this while also kiting camps to their max range and killing them with the last tick of burn from his jungle item. His consistent clear efficiency may be one of the most impressive things about NomadicBoulder's gameplay. It's really something to behold. And this is something he can do every single time. So if you're planning on picking up Mundo, I'd recommend putting several hours into nailing down this clear. It's incredibly important. As far as lane interactions go in the early game, the only ganks NomadicBoulder looks for are either completely free ones on a low health enemy who's overextended, or tower dives. You heard me right, this man tower dives a lot at level 4. Because Mundo has no hard CC, he's completely reliant on his laners to set up the gank, or else the enemy will just walk back to the safety of their turret. But if they're chunked and have a large wave crashing, there's nowhere for them to run and their turret won't even save them. In just 5 games that I watched, NomadicBoulder pulled off 3 tower dives in the early game. With Mundo, standard ganks are incredibly hard to pull off without the CC and all the mobilities that laners have these days. So he recognizes this and focuses on the high percentage windows where he can still effectively influence lanes. If this video has been helpful for you so far, it'd be awesome if you just give this video a like so YouTube will show it to more junglers who could use it. Transitioning from the early to the mid game, there are 5 distinct things that NomadicBoulder does which separate him as a master tier jungler. I guarantee some of these things you're missing if you're a low elo jungler, but you can implement them into your games to improve right away. First, he prioritizes clearing his camps on spawn to make sure he keeps up in gold and items. He's incredibly efficient in his pathing throughout the game and doesn't waste time looking for plays that aren't there. This leads us to the second thing, which is that he is really good at identifying winning fights and committing to them without hesitation. On a champ like Mundo, he only takes fights where enemies are already forced to engage. That includes picking a rotating enemy, setting up dives, teaming up with the support who cuts off their escape, joining skirmishes the enemy has already committed to, and fights around objectives. Without hard CC, he really is reliant on other circumstances to force enemies to engage the fight. Third, he always capitalizes on cross-map plays. Whenever the enemy jungler shows on the opposite side of the map, he punishes the side that he's on. That could be counter jungling, ganking the lane he's close to, or securing an objective. Most low elo junglers would just keep on clearing and then flame their teammate in chat for dying to a gank. NomadicBoulder makes the most out of the opportunity that he has. Fourth, after winning fights, he always converts it into bigger advantages. I can't tell you how many dragons, heralds, turret plates, and enemy camps he's taken after teamfight wins. Most low elo junglers will reset or go back to farming their camps and won't make the most out of the advantages they gain. NomadicBoulder does a fantastic job of pushing the advantage without overplaying it and getting greedy. He'll take as much off the map as possible without overstaying and getting himself or his teammates killed. Fifth, he manages waves for his laners incredibly well. Sometimes that means helping push out a wave to get them a good reset timer, and sometimes it's covering a wave for himself if his laner died or roamed to another lane. He doesn't let that golden XP go to waste. He consistently helps put his laners in a good lane state, and he also picks up extra golden XP for himself when it's mutually beneficial for both him and his teammate. With all these strategies used in the mid game, NomadicBoulder is usually pretty strong by the time late game rolls around. I've noticed a few different strategies he uses to win fights in the late game and to get that LP. When it comes to split pushers or isolated enemies, a lot of the time he'll just go ahead and engage 1v1 if he sees allies who can rotate within the next 20 seconds or so. Most laners would beat him in a 1v1, but he sustains through their damage and buys enough time for his own teammates to rotate over and pick up the kill. He knows exactly how long he can fight with them and tank until backup arrives to clean up the fight. Most split pushers don't have the discipline needed to leave him alone and realize that reinforcements are on the way, so they go for the fight. In siege scenarios, Mundo has pretty reliable poke, as his Q is super spammable and does % max health damage on enemies if it lands, while also slowing them. Teamed up with long range poke, Mundo has decent tools to help with the siege. In standard 5v5 teamfights, NomadicBoulder will focus on the most important carry, whether that's on his team or the enemy. If he has a fed ADC, he'll help peel with his Qs and disrupt the enemy from diving in. If the enemy carries are fed, he'll draw aggro and start kiting back while healing up with his ultimate. And as the enemy keeps chasing, they're eventually whittled down to a point where his team can turn and chase them down with a re-engage. NomadicBoulder absorbs a ton of damage and enemy abilities in teamfights, then kites back and re-engages as the healing comes through and the enemy is on cooldown. And of course, if there's not a significant amount of peel on the enemy team, he just ghosts in and runs down the ADC. His build makes him super sticky and provides more than enough damage to run down the carries. And when the enemy is forced to focus down the Mundo right in front of them, that means his own carries are free hitting the entire time. Like I mentioned earlier in this video, NomadicBoulder does an amazing job in the mid game of capitalizing on small advantages. If you want to improve your jungling, this video will teach you how to push your advantages without greeting and throwing your leads. I'll see you over there.